My work hours rarely aligned with my wife's schedule. I worked night shifts while she had a daytime job in construction management. We'd been together since high school, almost 25 years. She only began her career a few years ago after our kids grew older, having devoted her earlier years to raising our 3 boys. Things started to shift when she began spending more time socializing with her co-workers after hours. Her workday ended at 5 p.m., but she often didn't come home until 7 o'clock or 8 p.m. On a few occasions, she stayed out all night, claiming she had too much to drink and slept at her friend Sarah's house. This was uncharacteristic of her. She was usually the responsible one who ensured everyone got home safely. One night, while I was off work, I woke up around 3 a.m. and saw the glow of her phone screen. She wasn't hiding anything, but something didn't feel right. She got up and started getting ready even though her shift didn't begin until 8 a.m. When I asked where she was going, she said she was meeting co-workers for a morning walk. She seemed unusually dressed up, not overly fancy, but it was more effort than necessary for a simple walk. She left around 4 a.m., despite the cold, rainy weather. Later, I texted her to borrow her truck for a recycling trip. She took 15 minutes to reply, saying she was still on the walk, but I could get the truck from her workplace later. My instincts told me something was off. I'm not great at interpreting social cues, but the late-night texting and odd early-morning outings didn't sit well with me. I decided to check the phone records and found hundreds of texts between her and a number I didn't recognize. When I confronted her, she immediately turned the tables and demanded to see my phone. I handed it over without hesitation, but when I asked to see her messages with the unknown contact, she had already deleted them. When I entered the number into my phone, it was linked to a male co-worker. She feigned surprise and denied any inappropriate connection. She claimed they were just discussing work, but when I mentioned her staying with him during a supposed work trip, she became defensive and refused to explain. Instead of clarifying, she stormed upstairs. Following advice from a detective friend, I approached the situation strategically. He warned me that people often delete evidence when they sense an impending confrontation. He suggested documenting missing texts and calls to identify periods where they might have met in person. His advice was spot on. When I asked for her phone again, she deflected by demanding mine. Her focus wasn't on my messages, but on ensuring I didn't find anything on hers. When I mentioned the 900 messages exchanged with her co-worker in the last month, she couldn't deny it, but claimed they were about her wanting a divorce. The lies didn't end there. She'd once told me she spent 6 hours at a tattoo shop, but came home with no designs or photos. It was clear she'd likely stopped there briefly before spending the rest of the time with him. Her vague excuses about traffic and errands lacked the usual details she used to share about her day. I acknowledged my role in the strain on our marriage. Years of night shifts had made me irritable, and my temper likely pushed her away. Despite everything, I wanted to fix things and was willing to forgive. She suggested we stay together for the sake of our teenage sons, and I hoped we could rebuild. At times, she seemed like her old self, laughing and talking with me during family outings. But moments later, she'd make subtle, cutting remarks as if to remind herself not to get too close. One morning, she left early again. Having seen her truck at his house before, I decided to check. Sure enough, his truck was in the driveway. Shortly after, she texted me about buying household items. Playing along, I asked her to grab coffee creamer. As I watched, he pulled out of the driveway, and she backed him before they left together. Later, she claimed to be at Costco and sent a picture to prove it. When I asked for a photo of her truck in the parking lot, she dismissed me, saying she didn't care if I believed her. Her dishonesty hurt more than the betrayal itself. I felt trapped. Moving out felt like abandoning my kids, but staying in a house filled with lies was unbearable. My therapist advised against making decisions while emotional, so I stayed for the time being. However, the constant deceit, like her leaving at 4 a.m. under dubious excuses, made it increasingly difficult. Even my youngest son, who has autism, started questioning her inconsistencies. My wife's actions had started to erode the trust not only between us, but also with our kids. Watching her lose their faith in her was heartbreaking. It was a final push I needed to consult a lawyer. That meeting was a wake-up call. I learned that with shared custody, I'd only owe a small amount of child support. As for the house, she wanted to keep it, but the lawyer explained she couldn't afford the mortgage or buy me out. If I chose to sell, the property would have to go on the market. I had more financial resources than her, savings, investments, and company stocks, but not everything was fully vested, meaning she couldn't claim them. The lawyer suggested using the house as leverage. By agreeing to cover half the mortgage for 5 more years, until the kids finished school, I could still secure half of the future equity while giving them stability. It seemed like a fair arrangement. At that point, I hit my lowest moment. One night, I came home early, hoping her truck would be in the driveway, praying she'd have had a change of heart. When I tried to talk to her, it went nowhere. I felt foolish. That Sunday, I decided to give her space with the kids before my night shift. I sat in my car, scrolling through forums, trying to distract myself. On a whim, I downloaded a dating app, not because I was looking for a serious relationship, but to kill time. To my surprise, I matched with someone genuine. We met for drinks that Tuesday, and I was completely honest about my situation. She'd been cheated on before and understood the pain I was going through. When we kissed goodbye, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, hope. It wasn't about fixing my broken marriage, but about realizing I could still be appreciated by someone. That moment reminded me life could go on. Looking back, my marriage had been struggling for years. We'd both been unhappy, but comfort and fear of change had kept us together. Her affair only forced us to confront what we'd been avoiding. Sometimes I wondered if I might have strayed too, given the chance. But I had always kept my distance from situations that could lead to temptation. I filed for divorce last week. My oldest son, Ryan, who's 23, decided to move in with me. He hasn't spoken to his mom since he found out about the affair. The house situation is nearing its breaking point. She can't afford to keep it, and she doesn't have the funds to buy me out. I've pushed for a sale, and while the divorce has cost me $2,500, it's worth every penny. With the legal process nearing completion, I've started to think about the future. I've always been good with investments, and now I have financial freedom. I even planned to buy the classic convertible I've wanted for years, something I never felt I could justify while married. When I left the lawyer's office, I felt like a massive weight had been lifted. My wife still sends casual texts, acting as if nothing's wrong. She's even tried to chat about sales at stores or asked about my plans, but I mostly ignore her. Reality seems to be catching up with her, though. She recently had to give up her new truck because she couldn't afford the $730 monthly payments. Word from my sister is that her boyfriend has been through multiple marriages, leaving each partner once they were no longer useful to him. Part of me hopes they stay together long enough for the divorce to finalize. She's also trying to refinance the house, but the financial strain is too much for her. I found a rental house close to our old home, so the boys can go back and forth easily. My work schedule has shifted to help with school transportation. The divorce agreement is almost finalized. I'll get slightly less than half of everything, but my peace of mind is priceless. The investments that haven't vested yet remain mine, and they could be a significant asset in the future. At 47, I've started to imagine retiring abroad earlier than I ever thought possible. The idea of living somewhere far from the chaos, without unnecessary expenses or drama, sounds appealing. Last month, I took a trip to Thailand, and it gave me a fresh perspective. I've even met someone online who knows my whole story. These days, when I lose sleep, it's not because of the affair, but because of our 14-hour time difference when we text. The custody arrangement didn't go entirely in my favor. I get alternate weekends instead of equal time. But the boys are teenagers now, and most of their formative years are behind them. This schedule has allowed me to take a travel position at work with excellent overtime pay, and removing her from my insurance has saved me money. When I saw her recently to cover a medical expense for one of the boys, I felt nothing. I've learned she's dealing with health problems now. Perhaps karma catching up. I've also updated my life insurance, removing her as a beneficiary. For anyone going through something similar, yes, it's incredibly hard. You'll have sleepless nights. You'll feel like you've lost your dignity begging someone to stay. But you'll survive. I'm living proof that better days are ahead if you keep moving forward. Just remember, your heart might be broken, but don't let anyone take it away completely. There's someone out there who will value it again. She recently lost her job after reporting harassment, but her history of workplace relationships likely made her story hard to believe. She's now jobless, in debt, and will likely have to sell the house she fought so hard to keep. I even know of a great job opportunity she'd be perfect for, but my therapist reminded me it's no longer my job to save her. Sometimes, people have to face the consequences of their own choices.